Pedro from A&P-REACTS. I'm here today with Kragen Lum from Heathen to talk about the 5 guitar players that influenced him to pick up a guitar himself. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. Thank you for taking the time today to chat with me about your 5 most influential guitar players. You may have a bonus one here and there, maybe we'll end up getting 6 instead of 5 or 7 instead of 5. But once again, thank you for taking the time to chat. It gives us an opportunity to know a little bit more about you and about what got you to pick up the guitar. And with that in mind, was the guitar always the first instrument that you went to, or did you dabbed on other instruments before finalizing with the guitar?
Yeah, I mean, when I was really little, I took piano lessons, and I didn't really enjoy it or anything. I was just a little kid. The first time I heard Back in Black, AC/DC, was when I was 8. And as soon as I heard that, I said, I want to play guitar. I want to play that. And my parents got me like an acoustic guitar. Mm-hmm. And the first thing I said was, it doesn't sound right. It's an acoustic. Plus the acoustics back then, at least, they were really big. They were really hard to push down on the strings, and I didn't enjoy it. So I kind of took lessons, and then it phased out. And I took lessons off and on as a teenager, and it was probably when I was about 15 where something clicked. And I was playing an electric, and I started being able to play along with songs. And that's when it sort of clicked, and I was like, oh yeah, this is what I want to do. Do
you remember the first song you learned how to play on guitar?
Well, the very first song I learned how to play was Back in Black. But it wasn't, it was some acoustic, rendition of it with the, sort of old school open chords and stuff, which they use, but, they also use like partial chords and stuff. So, that was probably the first song. I don't think I ever really, I don't think I was ever able really, when I was a little kid, to play along with it or anything. When I was 15, I took a cassette tape to my teacher at the time, and I said, I want to learn this song. And while he was trying to figure it out, he was more like a sort of a classic rock guy. And while he was trying to figure it out, I figured it out, and I was like, okay, I think I got this. And then I went home and I played along with the tape, and I was like, okay, yeah, this is cool. That song was I Want to Be Somebody by Wasp.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and then from then on, I started learning more and more. And as a teenager, I was really fortunate. I took lessons from a studio musician in Los Angeles, a guitar player that taught me, not just kind of how to play stuff, but about sound and, technique and feel and all kinds of stuff. So I was lucky to have that guy as a teacher, for sure.
So now moving into your list, you have Indy Momsteen on your list, and I wasn't surprised to see that name on your list, but at what point did his influence hit you and change perhaps how you approach guitar playing?
Well, I remember hearing it for the first time when the first album came out, and I was blown away. And I would revisit that stuff over the years as I started to get better at playing guitar. And to me, he changed the guitar more than any other guitar player since Eddie Van Halen. And that's from my perspective. And the reason why I say that is because all of the modern day shredders all play stuff that he really introduced to guitar playing. It was there, and people had, used little elements of sort of some of the techniques and stuff, but they didn't do it how he did it, which was take classical violin, kind of scales and arpeggios and stuff like that, and apply it to rock or metal or whatever you want to call it. But I think everybody that plays sort of what I call 3-note per string scales on the guitar and does sweep arpeggios, they all owe it to him. And unfortunately, you know, his music, he never really had anything that was like a hit or anything like that. So like the mainstream kind of overlooks him. And he's also known for not, you know, I guess he's not a nice guy. I've never met him from all the tales that we always hear, you know, so that kind of leads to people not necessarily liking him, if you get what I mean, like as the person Yngwie. Again, I've never met him. He, you know, I have no idea, but anyway, I had him on my list because I really feel like without him, we wouldn't have modern day shredding the way that we have it now.
Is there anybody since him that's come close?
I mean, there are always people that are innovating and doing new things on the guitar. I guess to me, the way that I look at it is how many people adopted that technique, how widespread. So you could say something like, what is his name? Tosin Abasi from Animals as Leaders. Like, or I don't know if I pronounced his name right. He introduced a whole lot of new, interesting things to guitar playing, but you don't see the widespread use of those techniques. There are people who do it, of course, but it's not widespread. Whereas when Yngwie came out, there were like a ton of Yngwie clones and guys in thrash bands and even you know, at the hard rock or glam kind of bands at the time, they were adopting techniques that he was using and putting it into their playing. So, you know, it was the same thing, like where before that, Eddie Van Halen had introduced all these techniques and things, and they became prevalent and everybody started using them. You know, you could see the use of them from all of the 80s rock players or hard rock players and metal guys and Dimebag and, you know, I mean, everybody that uses whammy bar stuff. Gary would say Eddie Van Halen's one of his, you know, Gary Holt would say that's one of his influences. So, you know, you see kind of there's these players that have like this widespread use of things that they introduce. And so I don't know if I've seen that to the same extent. You know, we're all kind of using those same techniques, but, you know, making subtle differences. Yeah, subtle differences here and there, you know.
Yeah. With Momsteen, do you feel like he's one of those guys that you look at him and you want to take something from him and include it in your sound, but he has such a unique way of playing that almost makes you want to just put the guitar down because you feel perhaps that you can't reach it? Or do you feel that way about him?
No, I guess the way that I look at it is like I look at it from sort of a bigger picture point of view. Like I don't play any licks, Yngwie licks or anything, or try to play like him or sound like him. It's just the techniques that he introduced. You know, playing 3 notes per string in the scales, doing the sweep arpeggios, classical patterns for, you know, scale patterns and stuff that he sort of introduced and made more widespread. It's really that kind of stuff. I mean, I don't try to play like him at all. And I think most people don't, but the use of all of the things that he introduced is just so common. You know, I mean, you can't help but say that guy kind of did it. You know, I mean, his rhythm techniques are nothing to, they're nothing to, you know, aspire to or anything. They're not like, you know, he's not like he's not even a great rhythm guitar player, you know, but if he picks up a lead, you know, and he starts playing leads, I mean, there are videos on YouTube where he just picks up the guitar and just starts playing, and it's like, oh my God, like, it's just effortless for him.
Right, yeah. Next on your list, you have a dynamic duo. You have Gary Holt and Rick Hunold. So how are these two coming together? I know obviously there's the Exodus link there, but how did these two impact you? Or still impact you?
Well, I mean, you know, the H team, as they were called, was like, that was the thrash metal guitar duo, you know, where they traded off leads. And, you know, I mean, before that, we had, you know, the guys in Iron Maiden or the guys in Judas Priest, you know, they were doing harmonies and playing off of each other and playing leads. And Gary and Rick, I mean, they kind of like, they just got better and better over the years. I mean, I'm talking from Bonded to like maybe let's say Force of Habit or Impact. Impact was kind of the pinnacle, where they kind of their skills just got better and better and better, and to the point where it was like, holy shit, these guys are fucking incredible, and they played awesome rhythms. So it was this for a guy who plays thrash metal. Seeing that was like, these guys can do everything. They can play the rhythm stuff and they can play the lead stuff, and both are at a really high level. Whereas, you know, you look at a lot of the players in thrash bands, and this is not to throw any like guys under the bus, but if you take like old Creator, for example, like Milla, his solos were just, they weren't very good, you know, and his rhythms were killer, but it wasn't, he wrote killer songs, but it wasn't like he didn't have everything, at least from how I looked at it. And the H-Team guy, you know, the Exodus guys they had everything. They could do everything, you know, and they wrote killer riffs and they had killer tone. So it was kind of like the whole package there.
They were like the H-Team of the A-Team, or the team of the H-Team, whatever one you want to go with.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that was so great. It was so great when I was playing thrash in the early years to hear that, because what I really liked was I liked the rhythm guitar stuff from thrash metal, and I liked the lead stuff from hard rock. And I wanted to hear a band that could do all of it, you know? And so bands started doing it, you know? Exodus was one, you know, Testament had Alex Skolnick, so they had kind of both. And that was really what I wanted to listen to from a guitar perspective. I wanted to hear awesome rhythms and killer leads all in the same song.
Within the thrash genre, are the two of them the best 1-2 combo punch that a band has had?
Well, I mean, you know, it just depends on what you like. From my perspective, yes, because I wanted to hear melodic leads over killer thrash rhythms. You know, Slayer had an awesome guitar duo too, but their leads weren't melodic. You know, I loved listening to Slayer, but they weren't, for me, they weren't the pinnacle, you know, duo where they can do everything that I wanted to hear. So for me, that would be, you know, the original Exodus team.
And next on your list is an interesting one, because while I don't play guitar, if I was going to put 5 guitar players that definitely not influenced me, but that dictated my taste in metal, Marty Friedman would definitely be on that list.
Yeah, well, yeah, and Megadeth, that era of Megadeth, I would say probably actually even Dave Mustaine and Chris Poland, Megadeth always had both. They always had that killer duo. And what I liked so much about Marty Friedman's playing was that it was so tasty and tasteful, and it fit the song so perfectly. He's not a shredder. I mean, he can play really fast, don't get me wrong, but he doesn't play like most shredder guys do. He's not about playing a lot of notes. He's about playing notes that are perfect for that moment in the song. And I really like, I mean, that's, for me, lead guitar, that's what it should be. It shouldn't just be all technique. I mean, to me, like hearing guys play really fast, it's like, okay, well, that's impressive. But at the end of the day, like, I want to remember it, and I want to feel something, and I want to listen to something where I want to imitate that, you know, and capture it. Well, like, how did he capture that feel? And Marty Friedman did that. I mean, he did a lot of things that other people were doing, but he did them differently. And he introduced a lot of phrasing and sort of dynamics into the playing that a lot of the other shredder kind of guys just didn't really have.
In your view, is Rust in Peace the pinnacle for his work with Megadeth?
Yeah, I mean,
not to dismiss the albums that came after. I mean, Countdown to Extinction and Euthanasia and everything else that came after, great records. But
yeah,
it seems like all the stars aligned, if you will, with that Rust in Peace album.
Well, they kind of they captured lightning in a bottle. You know, I mean, they had great songs, and then they added that new element of Marty playing leads over the stuff, and it's incredible. Like the combination. I don't know if they wrote specifically for him to play, or if he just happened to create something that was perfect over that part. But whatever it was, I mean, yeah, I think that's probably the Marty Friedman era Megadeth album that I would go to if I had to choose one, you know?
Yeah, it's funny that to me, I'm always divided when it comes to Megadeth and when it comes to Marty Friedman within Megadeth, because the album that I love the most is Countdown to Extinction.
Right.
But the album that I consider to be the best is Rust in Peace. I don't know if this makes sense to you, because one would think that the one that you like the most would be the best. But just because I like it the most, I am also smart enough to understand that it's not necessarily their best. At least
right.
I can look at both things separately. You know, I can like something in knowing that there's something better than the one that I like, you know?
Sure. Yeah, that totally makes sense. I mean, his work on Countdown to Extinction is great too. But I think there's something a little bit more magical on Rust in Peace.
And I don't. It's a little bit more classical. Every time I listen to that album, I feel like it has almost. I know people are going to hate me for saying this, but there's almost a symphonic, cinematic feel to the way the guitars sound on that record.
I mean, it could be elements within the songs themselves, like how they're written. It could be the chord progressions that they're using were maybe a little more sort of classical oriented kind of thing. It's hard to say. I mean, I don't hear classical in it, like when I think of, you know, the new Heathen record or something like that. You know, obviously I'm using an example I'm familiar with, but there's a, you know, like I think of that as like real, like more classical oriented, but that's also because like I was involved with it, whereas I'm just a listener with Megadeth. Yeah. So I don't know, but I mean, people keep returning to it. It seems like that is the fan favorite, either that or Peace Sells maybe, but there's just something incredible about it. I was lucky enough to see them play. There was a show that they did at the Ventura Theater, which is mentioned in that new Rust in Peace book that Mustaine put out, and it was right before they released the album, and it was the first show with Marty, and I was there, and it was killer. Oh my God, I was blown away at what I was hearing and seeing, you know. So
I was 16, 17. I saw them on the Euthanasia tour, and quite the experience. Like that lineup with Nick Mintz on the drums. I mean, that lineup is absolutely perfect. So for a young kid like me to have the opportunity to see that lineup, it was just incredible. I don't think there's any other words to describe that experience.
Yeah, for sure.
Next on your list, you have James Hetfield. So James Hetfield, where does he come in as far as your playing, perhaps your own playing style? Do you take a little bit of him? Is there something that he has that you enjoy? Obviously, he's on your list.
I mean, for me, he is the best thrash metal rhythm guitarist.
You're the second person that's told me that. In this week. So
okay. he is. I mean, he established the right hand technique that is used in thrash metal. I mean, if you had to, like, just like when we were talking about Yngwie earlier, if you had to signify somebody that changed guitar playing, I wouldn't pick Kirk Hammett. I would pick James Hetfield, because the rhythm techniques that he employed and used in the early Metallica stuff, everyone used them. And in a strange way, as a guitar teacher and somebody who's sort of educated in music, the techniques that he used are bad techniques. I mean, technically they're bad. Like not doing any alternate or not doing any up picks and only doing down picks, for example, is not like necessarily, it wouldn't be considered good technique. However, we do it because it sounds good. And, you know, I mean, he was the greatest. I mean, even his stage presence there for that period of time up through probably the Black album or whatever, I mean, he was a rock star. I mean, and we didn't have many of those, you know, but he was also just killer rhythm guitar player. And it was a huge influence on me and how I wanted to play. You know, like I said, I loved the rhythm guitar from like thrash metal and the leads from other stuff that wasn't, you know, that were more melodic, and wanted to see if I could merge them somehow. So, you know,
it's just really funny for me to listen to you talk about this, because like I said, I talked to Doc Coyle about his 5 most influential guitar players, and he had James Hetfield very high on his list, and he said pretty much everything that you just said. And all of these things were things that influence him as well as a guitar player. And I feel like Metallica sometimes gets a little bit, it's really weird amongst metal fans, let's put it this way, because it's like metal fans complain when bands are not recognized for their work, and then when bands are recognized for their work, they're sellouts. So it's like there's no winning. You know what I mean? Like either you're a sellout or your fans are pissed off because nobody listens to you, or not enough people are listening to you, or you're not mainstream. So it's like it's a no-win situation. And I always feel Metallica kind of has the brunt of it all, you know, when it comes to that sort of mentality. So I feel amongst fans, if you probably did a survey, I don't think James Hetfield would rank that high. Maybe I'm wrong, but I honestly, because of the whole Metallica impact, I don't think he would rank that high. Probably Kirk Hammett would rank higher if you're talking about a guitar player within Metallica. And I just thought it was really interesting that Doug Coyle mentioned him, and now you're mentioning James Hetfield. So that goes to show you what do we know as fans.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the thing, is like a lot of it's kind of a popularity contest. So if I look at a guitar magazine and I see Kirk Hammett on the cover, you know, it's kind of like, okay, well, you know, I mean, he's not one of those guys that influence me. So, or that I think necessarily is the greatest, you know, he's good. But I think he's on the cover because he's in Metallica, not because of, you know, not because of anything else. Whereas, you know, I mean, Hetfield's not going to be on the cover, but I think he's way more influential in terms of, you know, guitar techniques and stuff, and even looks. I mean, you look at all the bands that came out around the same time, and suddenly you had a guitar player from Overkill started to try and look like Hetfield, and they had other guys, and it was the whole demeanor of him. You know, he was the man, you know, back then. So
I totally agree with you, and I can see where that's coming. Last on your list, perhaps last, I'm going to let you add a bonus one after we're done with this list. But next on your list, Randy Rhodes, iconic guitar player. I mean, like, once again, I'm not a guitar player, I'm not a musician, but if I was putting a list of guitar players that I'm completely mesmerized by whenever I see a video of, or when I listen to something, Randy Rhodes has to be on that list. I mean, it's a must. So what is it about him that makes it important to you?
Well, the most important thing I think that I took away from his playing wasn't necessarily technique or anything like that. It was how he constructed a guitar solo. To me, a guitar solo should be a couple of different things. It should be which is what a solo is supposed to be, but it should also fit the song and be memorable. And he was able to do that. I mean, I can't imagine hearing any of those songs with a different solo on them. Whereas I think a lot of times I could hear some songs, I could hear maybe somebody else, you know, play a different solo or something, and it wouldn't really bother me. But with that stuff, it was just how he constructed everything. I mean, you look at the song "Diary of a Madman." That's a classical piece. That is a orchestral. Like, he had immense knowledge of the music and how to put all those pieces together and make it sound like classical music, but in a rock format. And there's a lot of elements actually in the first 2 Ozzy albums that are like that, where it's sure, it's rock or hard rock or whatever, metal, whatever you want to call it, but those elements and the sort of song construction and the solos that he put over it were just all perfect for the songs. And I mean, that's what I appreciate the most about his playing, is just really how to write a solo. I think that's missing a lot in modern music, at least for my tastes. I hear a lot of notes, but I don't hear a lot of stuff that really is like perfect for the song. Or, you know, sometimes it's better to play less and capture a feeling than it is to just play a whole bunch of notes, you know?
Yeah.
So
Quality versus quantity.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you feel sometimes in songs now, and I want to go back to Randy, but do you feel now that some guitar players in some songs, they add the solo on the track because you kind of expect it to have a solo there? So there's not the thought process of going into, how did the song get to this point? Now I'm going to put the solo here. So what do I want out of this in order to continue the track, in order to make the track better, make it bigger, expand the song? There's not a lot of thought process. It just feels like, oh, you know, this is where people are expecting a solo. So let me just throw a few things in here and kind of like, that's how I'm going to go with it.
That's exactly it.
That?
That's exactly it. I think what's happened over the years, not just in thrash metal, but in metal in general, is the music used to be about breaking the rules and playing what we thought was great. Didn't matter what it was, we just play something. And we come up with the best that we could, and we'd write what fits the song. And nowadays, it's almost like there's this set of rules that everyone has to follow. And one of them is, I must have a guitar solo at X spot in the middle of the song somewhere, or in the second, you know, 2/3 or whatever it is. And there's not a lot of thought. It's kind of like, okay, well, I got a solo here, so let me just put something down. I hear that all the time, where I'm kind of like, okay, well, it just sounds like a bunch of licks run together. It doesn't really fit necessarily. It just sounds like a bunch of licks, you know? And to me, that's not really what the solo should be. I'd personally rather not hear a solo. If I feel like a song doesn't need a solo, I wouldn't put a solo in it. I would only want to play what feels right, you know? But I'm not sort of a slave to the process or the rules or whatever is there. And I think a lot of people are these days.
It's really interesting, because sometimes I'm talking to my son, and we're going through, when we're doing our videos on our channel and we're going through a song, let's say we're doing an older track, and it starts off with a solo at the opening. And then at the end of the song, and then it has a solo towards the end, or like 2/3 in, there's a second solo, and it's a back-to-back solo with the two guitar players coming in and doing a back-to-back. So at the end of the song, I say to my son, you can tell this is an old school track because it started off with a solo. How many songs do you hear now that start off with I don't know, like a minute-long guitar solo? It's just, you don't see that anymore. You know, like the odd one here and there, but it's just not common anymore. And I think the solo used to mean something, used to be in the song, because it elevated the track. Was almost that first one perhaps was the warm-up, and then eventually you always listen to a track and it's building up towards something, and that something is this climatic solo. And I just feel like a lot of that is taken away, because it's almost like people are building songs by numbers. You know, it's like there's a cookie cutter formula, and I'm following that formula all the time. Maybe changing the order just so that the songs don't sound the same. But there's not a lot of creativity in terms of, you know, let me try something completely outside the box, you know?
Yeah, well, they're trying to follow the rules. I mean, I think a lot of bands are afraid to deviate from the rules because they're afraid that their fans won't like it. I think thrash bands are afraid to do what a lot of thrash bands had great ballads, for example, and they don't do them anymore. And I think they're just afraid that their fans won't like it. But at the end of the day, some of them won't. But albums need variety, and they need pacing, and they need different feels. And you can't just have an album of the same cookie cutter 10 songs of the same thing over and over again, or it's boring. You know,
and I think you can create an album that has the ups and downs, that the songs are different, constructed different, sound different. But when you look at the overall picture of the album still sounds as one. And I think people
Right.
forget a little bit about that. Like, you could have diversity of approach within a record without changing the DNA of the band or the DNA of the album itself. The two things are not completely apart from each other. I think the two things can totally coexist on the same record.
That's right. I totally agree. I mean, I think they should coexist, you know? I mean, you look at those old Metallica albums, and they had variety. They had all kinds of stuff all throughout the album, fast, heavy, ballad. They had diversity and instrumental. They had a lot of different things within those. And that's why people keep going back to those albums and listening to them. It's because the album sort of takes you on a journey, and there are ups and downs and peaks and valleys. And it's not just the same thing over and over again, with 10 versions of the same formula, with different notes in them.
I totally agree with you. Going back to Randy Rhodes, do you think the impact that he had, at least on you, was it not just from how he played, but how, from what I'm getting, is from how he constructed what he ended up then playing? Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, I still listen to that stuff, and it's still inspiring. I love there are a lot of little things that he did to make the solos even more memorable than just the parts. So, I'll use one example. So Over the Mountain, he has this lick in the main solo, where he double tracks it, and he has it in 2 different octaves, and he plays the lick once and then he repeats it. And it's like it makes it really memorable. You're like, oh, okay, cool, that's cool. And then later in the song, when he solos again towards the very end, they're in a different key, but he plays the exact same lick and repeats it twice and then ends it differently. And there's this continuity to the whole thing that pulls it all together and makes the solo not just a solo, but part of the song. You now can't hear the song without that part in it, because it's not just in one place, but it's double tracked in different octaves, and then it's repeated at the end. And it's what, in classical music, it's what they call a motif. So a motif is basically a series of notes that is repeated throughout the piece that helps to make it memorable, and it becomes part of the piece. It's not, it's a big part of the piece. So that is the thing that I love the most about all of that. And it's a really cool way to make the solo part of the song and also keep it catchy and memorable and all the stuff, and it's cool to play. It's still fun to play that. It's not like it's easy.
I don't think it's easy at all, at least coming from me. I mean, I'm looking from the outside. I'm so discoordinated. I don't even know how you guys can play guitar to begin with. I'm always amazed whenever I see a music video and I see you guys play, and you could see the hands, how fast you guys are moving. I mean, that to me is incredible. You guys are surgeons with the guitar. It's just, it boggles my mind. Like, my son plays guitar, but he's better with a PlayStation controller.
Yeah. Well, it's all practice. He probably spends more time practicing PlayStation.
Unfortunately, that's correct.
That's all right. But I mean, that's it. It's repetition. And then, every player's different and has different things that are important to them. And, that makes the player they are,
I only have 2 more things to ask you. And one is, outside of these 5 or 6, because we had Gary and Rick, outside of these 6, do you have anybody else that is memorable to you, that is an important influence for you?
Yeah. So it's not metal at all. It's a guitar player named Alan Holdsworth, who played mostly jazz or jazz fusion. And I was mesmerized when I heard this guy play, because there's a fluidity to it that is, it's hard to describe. It's he plays guitar and he's imitating a horn, like a trumpet or a saxophone, and it was just his tone and everything about it was so unique and incredible. And he was a very different player, and a lot of the things that I tried to do that I thought were new techniques for like to include in metal, I was inspired by listening to Alan Holdsworth to try things that maybe were a little bit outside of the norm. And, you know, he also did these crazy chord voicings and things that I think, you know, probably influenced some of my band Prototype's clean guitar parts, or, you know, to a certain extent. But it's just, he was very different. You know, Alan Holdsworth was even influential to Eddie Van Halen. You know, Eddie Van Halen would talk about Alan Holdsworth all the time, and even got him a record deal at one point, you know, with Warner Brothers. You know, I would say that would probably be the sort of non-metal bonus influence, so to speak.
It's almost like the hidden track at the end of the CD. Like back in the day, you would buy a CD, you would play the last song, and then you would press fast forward to see if there was a hidden track on it.
Yeah.
So this is almost that hidden gem at the end.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's just, you know, it's the music is not for everybody, but he was an amazing player.
One last question before I let you go.
Sure.
When you're playing with Heathen, do you ever improvise when you're doing it live, or do you try to stick as much as possible with the original material? Do you give yourself a little bit of room?
It depends. So I would say I probably improvised more when I was playing with Exodus than I did when I would play with Heathen. A lot of the stuff in Heathen, I at least for the songs that I played on the albums, they were very mapped out. You know, I wrote a solo basically. There were a lot of times when I was playing with Exodus. I remember when they called me to do a tour in Australia, and I had 12 hours notice. Like Gary had hurt his foot or something, he couldn't walk, and they called me like last minute, and I hadn't played any of the stuff for like 2 years. So I relearned all the rhythm stuff so I could play the songs, but a lot of the leads I was like, I didn't remember, you know. So I didn't have time, you know, to relearn them all because I had 12 hours to get on a plane and leave. So I remember like on that tour, I literally on my set list, I wrote down what key the solo section was in. I wrote E or D or whatever the key was for the solo section, and then I would just improvise. And of course I knew what the ones on the record sounded like, so I would try and mimic them a little bit. But there were a couple times where I was like, fuck, I'm just gotta wing it here, you know. And some nights it was great, and other nights it was fucking horrible. But that's improvising, you know. I mean, that's what it's about.
That sounds like an epic story. I mean, I find that kind of stuff amazing, because I'm sure the fans, even if they noticed, they didn't care. I mean, when you're watching a band live, there's so many things happening that you can get away with a lot.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, you know, it's just one of those things where when you're put in that situation as a musician, you just do your best to hold down the fort. You know, learn the songs, learn as much as you can, and then if you have to write down key signatures and improvise, then you just do it. That's just part of the gig.
So on that tour, while everybody's enjoying themselves backstage before they go on, are you practicing a little bit? Like, are you nervous? Like, at least for the first couple of shows until you got into a routine?
Oh yeah, man. I mean, the full story is I got the phone call at 8 o'clock in the morning. Lee called me, and I'm like, why is he calling me so early? He's never up this early. So I was at first I was like, man, I'm not ready to talk yet. I hadn't had coffee or anything. And so I called him back after he left a message. I was like, maybe he butt dialed me, like, I don't know. So I called him back, and he said, hey, you know, can you go to Australia with us? And I said, sure, when? And he said, tonight. And so yeah, I was so stressed out. I mean, by the time we got off the flight, I had like the worst headache, like stress headache, you know, tension headache, and just I remember we got into the hotel, and we got into the hotel room, and you know, we got settled, and then like 30 minutes later, Lee came in to show me one of the new songs. This was right after Blood In, Blood Out had come out that I didn't know yet. You know, so it was like I had to learn songs the night before the first set. And then, you know, there was no time to learn solos. So yeah, it was a crazy experience, but it was awesome. Those guys are great people.
Well, I hope 2021 is a much better year than, I mean, I don't want to jinx it, so I'm not going to say things cannot get any worse. So let's just say let's hope 2021 is a better year, because I would love to see you guys on the road. I would love to hear you guys play the new Heathen tracks live. So let's keep our fingers crossed that at some point in 2021, you guys hit the road, you come to Toronto, and I'll be there to watch you guys play some of those killer tracks that are on this new album.
That would be killer. I would love it. We haven't been there for many, many years. I think the last time we played there was in 2010 maybe, or 11 with Destruction. So it's been a long time.
Yeah, I think with I think it was 11 or 12, maybe 12.
No, it was 11. It was 11. Yeah, that's when the US tour was.
Yeah,
yeah,
that's a long time ago, really long time ago.
Yeah.
Well, let's hope 2021 brings you guys over to this side of the continent. And I'll have a blast seeing you guys live. The album is killer. Congratulations on the Heathen album.
Thank you very much.
It's a killer record. We need more records from Heathen, so use the quarantine time and start working on the next one.
I'm already got songs.
Wow.
Yeah, so we won't make everybody wait 10 years.
I didn't want to put you on the spot. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm trying to be nice. I mean, you took the time to sit here with me. So I don't want to put you on the spot.
You can put me on the spot.
So, I was kind of like putting like in between the lines there, you know, like don't take too long for the next one. So
yeah. No, the band is notoriously bad about putting stuff out on a regular basis. And I want to change that. So we're going to do our best to, you know, to put out more stuff. Lee and I have been talking about new songs already, and he's got a bunch of ideas that really he just didn't have ready for the last one, and so, you know, we'll get something going.
All right, man. Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. All the best. Stay safe and stay healthy out there.
You too, man. Thanks again for having me on.
Oh, my pleasure. Take care.
All right, you too.